Good evening, councillors. Good evening to our special guests tonight, and good evening to all of our staff members as well, and welcome to our December meeting. It's nice to see you all here. As our traditions, we'd like to acknowledge the Ngadjuri and the Kaurna people, the traditional custodians of the land and the waters of the Light Regional Council area. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are present today. I'll call for any apologies. No apologies, no leave of absence and no non-attendance. All been very good. The confirmation of our minutes, the first recommendation we have here is that the minutes and the confidential minutes of the meeting of the ordinary council meeting held Tuesday the 26th of November 2024 be confirmed as a true and correct record of that meeting. Would someone like to move that way? Thanks, Councillor Allison. Someone like to second that? Councillor Collins? Oh, Councillor Lynn, sorry. Are there any questions, councillors? Any comments? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, those against, and that's carried. We move on to our communications, and we're going to do things slightly different in my presentation tonight with what I've been up to, and we'll have the matters on the screen. It's been brought to my attention, and I think it's fair enough too, that I tend to just report on what I think you might want to hear rather than what actually has been happening. And I think sometimes that's probably not being absolutely open, and also it not that anything is hidden away, because all of it is in the council minutes when they come out, but sometimes it does give an opportunity to ask a question on the night. But the two things I'd like to raise tonight that I thought were important in the last month in particular, one happened last night at the Kapunda High School. I keep singing the praises of this particular school, but I've got to say last night, it nearly made my eyes water, with the presentations that were there last night and the students and their behaviour. The whole school itself has an atmosphere of something. And it was a presentation by Louise Pryor, who graduated from that school in 2010, who's gone on to do some absolutely wonderful things there. And she's in a wheelchair. Yet last night she was absolutely inspiring, quite incredible. And I think so much so, the principal there, Principal David, he is such a passive, peaceful man, and he's done an extraordinary job in keeping that school in the manner that he has, to the point where he's been seconded to the Nurayupta Primary School, High School, for 12 months. To try and settle things down a little bit there, which they've been having a few concerns. So they've asked David to go over there and try and sort some of those matters out. But again, it was wonderful last night, and that was a great credit to the school. And the building of Warringah is taking shape pretty much, and that's being, of course, hurried along by the students who are actually working on that building itself. The other matter was the opening of the Greenock cricket nets. It might sound a little bit sort of ho-hum, but this is a project that has been on our agenda as a council, and certainly for Greenock Cricket Club, for 8 years. And finally, last Sunday, they were opened to a very, very happy Greenock Cricket Club. They're an outstanding facility from a very dangerous facility that they had previous. And that cricket club has gone from strength to strength over the last few years, as well as Centenary Park in Greenock is a great credit to that community, and certainly to the management committee. And I think our ward councillors too have supported what's happening down there right through, would attest to that. It's a great credit to them, and now they've got the cricket nets going there. All the landscaping will take place now around those nets, and the big 200-year-old River Red Gum will now stand out and be a highlight to all the visitors that can come along there now. And the cricket players won't be in danger of being hit by a falling tree or falling limb. But they were probably the two things that I had on top of my mind to inform you tonight, because I think they're both very positive, and certainly the cricket nets, this council has supported that journey, and it's been a difficult one, as we all know, from various matters that took place on that journey, that it's come to fruition. And I think the project was probably a couple of $100,000, so it wasn't petty cash, but they'll enjoy that facility. Is there anything on that list up there that you'd like me to perhaps explain or justify? If not, we can move on. We don't have any petitions tonight, and we do have some special guests though, which I'm really, really pleased to introduce. It's a great pleasure, and I commend Pepper Micken, our staff member, for her initiative and her tenacity in getting this program brought to our attention over a long period of time. But now it seems to be like it's coming to the pointy end, which I'm really pleased. Tonight we've got Kate Ellis and Julia Jones representing the Raising Literacy Australia, and they're going to make a presentation to us to talk about early childhood and literacy intervention programs, etc. And I think you'll realise when we look at Pepper's report, there's a great need in this community here in Kapunda in particular for us to pay a lot of attention to what's being said tonight, and hopefully provide some actions to support what we discuss. So, having said that, I might introduce Kate and Julia for their presentation, and a big welcome.
I think I'd learn how to turn a microphone on. But, thank you very much, Mayor O'Brien, and elected members and council staff for having us here. Julia's already run away from the microphone, but this is Julia Jones, the Deputy Director of Raising Literacy Australia, and my name's Kate Ellis. I know that you've had this presentation for a while, and I know that you have a very busy agenda, so I'm going to try to not take up more of your time than is necessary. But I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on who we are and how we came to be here. So Raising Literacy Australia is a South Australian-based charity. We've existed for 19 years, and we've run programs which I know your kindergarten directors are well aware of, where every baby that's born in South Australia is provided with books and resources, which we craft and put together and publish, as is every preschooler. But we are increasingly looking to add to that targeted programs for the communities that need support the most. And so that's when we were lucky enough to cross paths with Pepper and Mel and have a conversation, particularly about some of the really alarming evidence that is coming out of the area of light in terms of early development, that we're really keen to talk about how we might be able to help. Thanks, Julia. You're doing an excellent job there, because I'm already not keeping to the presentation, which I am known to do. So basically, what we know is that what we do before children get to school impacts on their whole lives. So whilst we have literacy in our title, this is about more than literacy. This is about early development. It is about supporting. The neuroscience tells us that if we support brain development in the first 5 years, that has impacts on educational outcomes, but also on health outcomes, on local crime statistics, on almost every measure throughout that individual's entire life can be shaped back to their experiences during the first 5 years of life. So it's pretty important that we get it right. So that's why we're proposing a pilot program to begin with every newborn baby that is born in Light, and we hope also in Barossa, from July 2025. She's one step ahead of me. You're so clever. This is the first time that as an organisation we've put specific funding on the table for one geographic area. That is not something that we do often. So I think the question is, why here, and what brings us here tonight? And the answer, sadly, is really alarming statistics. We know through the Australian Early Development Census, which measures the outcomes of every 5-year-old when they reach school age, that South Australia is behind the national average when it comes to where our children are when they get to school. And the council area of Light is behind the South Australian average. The other thing that we know is that whilst other areas have been improving their results, this area has been going backwards. So there is something really alarming in terms of the statistics about the early childhood development in this area. It is second only to the APY lands in South Australia for the results that we're seeing. I say that because we all know that it's really important that if children have not got those basics when it comes to emotional connection, when it comes to language development, when it comes to a whole range of measurements by the time they get to kindergarten, by the time they get to school, that can often never, ever be caught up. So we need to do something, and we need to do it in the early years. And that's what brings us to light here this evening. I said I wasn't going to talk for very long. I'm going to speed it up, I promise. So just in terms of the program, one of the things that we do is we use books, but we use books as the tool. Books are the tool to build the connection and the emotional bond between the parent and the carer and the child. Books are the tool to build oral language skills, early literacy skills, but also emotional development. So in this program, we have a layered approach where one layer is the provision of information, books and resources directly to families every month after their child's birth. Layer 2 is to promote the social connection with other families at existing groups and services. And layer 3 is to provide wraparound services, so access to free parenting workshops, connections with other service providers, information on how to better support developmental outcomes for their children. So just running through this, and I will do this quickly. So that includes a monthly book, but also some parent information tip sheets activities. It then includes intensive parent supports. This is actually the magic of this program. It's not anything that I stand here saying, it's actually Pepper. This is the important bit, is about building connections between families. So they get the resources, but then they come into the library where they might have someone explain how to best use them, where they might have some local service providers come in, at a speech pathologist if you're having trouble with some of those areas. That might be a paediatrician, but we're looking to have intensive supports which are face-to-face. And this all goes to support each other in a layered approach. So this is really important because one of the other major programs that we're running at the moment that I hope you've seen is called Words Grow Minds. And it's actually about just providing really accessible information to parents about how they can boost their child's development and what supports exist for them to do it. So we will help to promote the program. We will help to get parents to register their child. We will help to select book packs, which will be delivered every month. We will see that they are delivered direct to the door of every baby born in light. They will receive their book pack and they'll say, "Thank you, Council, this is a great program to support." But really, probably most importantly is the next slide, and that is they will know that there is a place to go in the local community where they can get more information, where they can talk to people if there is a problem, and they can get connections to the local services in this area. And that is what will happen with the library services, where they will promote the program, feature the selected books, mentor local playgroups, local kindergartens to integrate the program, invite the early years network to join them, host local events, upcoming events, authors, singers. They will partner with us and a range of professionals to promote parenting workshops. And we need to do that in a way, if I say to most parents, "Do you want to come to a parenting workshop?" they'll probably tell me where to go pretty quickly, because most people don't want to say, "I don't actually know how to engage with my child. I don't know how to support their development." But if we say, "Do you want to come along and see some examples of some authors and some singers and some doctors doing what they do?" It's actually about role modelling that so that parents can pick up those skills and know where to go. And it's also about partnering with retailers, with businesses to promote the program, to embed the program across the community and adapt it to the light community. So all of this is something that we would then measure. We have very targeted outcomes, which we would measure throughout the program by surveys, by focus groups, by interactions with services, by questionnaires, by collecting library data service. When we piloted the Words Grow Minds program in Mount Gambier, there was a 24% increase in the borrowing of local children's picture books at the local library. We will keep track of all of that data. And if it doesn't work, we'll come to you. We'll come to you and say, what is it that is the problem that we're not addressing here? But we think it's really important that we try an intensive program in this area where the statistics are telling us there is a problem that does not exist in other parts of South Australia on a completely different trajectory to other towns and cities across South Australia. We will not turn a blind eye to that, and we want to come in and help. So that's where we get to funding. As an organisation, as I said, we're a charity, but we've gone to our own supporters, to our own donors, and we are putting $100,000 of our money on the table. That money would be spent for the program in Barossa and Light. But if for any reason Barossa didn't go ahead with that program, that $100,000 would stay on the table to be spent on resources for Light. We will spend that one to come up with the resources, come out with the supporting materials, but two, to actually measure and evaluate the program. It's actually not something we want to do just to make everyone feel better. We need to measure if we're getting results, and we will independently evaluate the outcomes of the investment. So we are putting $100,000 on the table. The program, the cost of the program, I'm getting straight to the point now, is $108 per child per year. My information is that there are on average 155 babies born each year in Light, which equals $17,000 a year. So that is the proposition that is before the council. And we are very hopeful that we'll be able to work with you. We're even more optimistic that we'll be able to get results. And we're very happy to answer any questions, which is actually what I brought Julia along for. She's going to step up now when you throw them at us. So thank you. I did race through that, but as I said, I'm happy to answer any questions or go through in any more detail anything that elected members may be interested in.
No, thank you, Kate. Well, I'll open up, councillors. Does anyone have questions or two? Councillor Fabio?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. It's very informative. I guess one question that springs to mind is what's changed, say, in the last 20 years? Like we've gone backwards. You're saying the Light Regional Council will, obviously 20 years ago, we were better than we were now.
Yeah.
What's changed?
We don't know the answer for that. That is exactly the question we were posing beforehand. So there's a couple of things. It's not COVID. It's not the economy. What's happening here is very different to what's happening nationally and even what's happening in South Australia. So, I mean, we've been measuring this data. We know that South Australia is not increasing our results as quickly as the other states and territories, but we're going okay. Except it is a blip on the radar where it is going in the other direction. And, you know, I know some people might say, well, there's some sort of error in the data. There's something that's happened in these years. But we've actually heard anecdotally from local kindergarten teachers, from local primary school teachers, that it's actually really hard because the children that are arriving in their services, and I'm not trying to speak on your behalf, you tell me if I'm wrong, the children that are arriving in the services are not at the level that previous cohorts of children were. So, I mean, we could all speculate what's changed. It might be that, you know, times are really tough, that lots of families, mum and dad are both working. There is a decrease in the number of interactions that are happening with that baby and that child every day. It may be that there's been a change in some service providers in the local area. But that's why we think the best way forward is, one, to provide information on why it's important, what parents can do or carers can do to turn it around. But three, what services exist. You've got some great service providers, but if people don't know about them and don't refer to each other, they're not being utilised properly. So I'd love to know what's happened in this area elsewhere, but I think you're better equipped to answer that than I am, probably.
Councillor Coleman?
I just it seems to me there's a duplication in what you're doing because, I had kids, it was quite a few years ago now, but when they were young, but we, you were put into a baby group and we all went off to the baby group and all before, we went to the thing and you all learned, what to expect when the baby was born, and then the baby's born, then you have the nurse comes out and tells you all the things that you need to know, and you go to your baby groups and, like our kids all had books and everything. They never had a very fortunate life, but and I know some don't. But it seems, why would you do every child that's born when some are privileged and some aren't? So why don't you just try and concentrate on the ones that haven't got the support which you're talking about? Because I'd say the statistics say there are some kids like that in this council area, but there's a larger majority, I would have thought, that would have been well resourced and well brought up.
It's an excellent question, and it's probably related to the previous question. So we might have thought that when you actually look at the data, where we see the biggest increases in vulnerability in South Australia is actually in some of our wealthier suburbs and households. So we've seen big increases in suburbs like Burnside, like Walkerville. And so it shows that, the numbers of vulnerable children are still linked to lower socioeconomic areas, but it actually shows there isn't a direct correlation with the wealth of parents or the number of books in the household necessarily. And that's where a whole lot of things like screen time come in. It was probably, I don't know how old your kids are, but there's probably a lot of people who had kids before they were sitting on mobile phones when they were going through the shopping centre or when they're sitting in the restaurants. So there's a different level of information that is required. And the answer about duplication is CAF's visits and mothers groups. We've seen a downturn in the number of people that are accessing services, and the families that aren't accessing those services need somewhere that is safe, that they trust, that they can engage in, which is the power of local libraries. It's actually non-judgmental, it's a safe place, it's friendly, and if you bring in other services to stand alongside Pepper, it's a bit different than having to go and line up at a government agency. We do think that there are different roles here. We know that the federal government are funding the formal childcare centres. We know that the state government's now focusing on the rollout of 3-year-old preschool and a 4-year-old preschool. But all of the evidence is showing us it's the home environment. If you can actually change the home environment, then you can make over twice as much difference. And unfortunately, often that's the bit that seems to fall through the gaps because no one thinks that that's their area of responsibility.
Councillor Lynn. All right.
That probably turned off.
No, you're not.
I can hear.
A granddaughter that when she knows they're going up the street and we go to a library and she's 3 and they've been reading to her since she was born. I have a great grandchild that is actually, she's just been born and my granddaughter is actually reading to her. And I said, that's ridiculous. That is just ridiculous, reading to a baby. And she said, but that's what you do. Well, we never did that. And our kids all got through school and everything all right without it. But we never read to them as babies. But this seems to be a program that's working.
Well, I certainly hope so. So it's interesting because I had a friend, a very well-educated, very successful friend, who said to us recently, I thought reading to my baby was just a kind of cute thing to do. I didn't actually get that it was a really important thing to do. But the difference between when your children were babies and now is we actually have in black and white the science that shows us how to increase babies' brain developments. Like, I just think that's the most extraordinary thing in the world. And, the really clever thing is it's not through special medicines, it's not through a whole range of things. What it is between positive interactions between adults and children. So it doesn't have to be a book. It can be a talking to your child about what you're putting in the shopping trolley. It can be a song that you're singing, but it's that back and forth positive interaction actually turns on neural connections in the brain. And we know it now. So we've just got to make sure parents and carers know it, and we've got to give them everything that they need to do it more. And I think that's pretty exciting.
Councillor Allison.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Bill. My question was, why is the state government not doing more at this age? Why would council be a place to go for this? I would have thought that, yeah, state government, education department.
So the state government is funding $1.5 million a year to run a Words Grow Minds campaign, which is across the whole community. What we're talking about is recognising that there are areas where we need to be more intensive and to work closer with families and to try and change what's happening in the home. So they're putting in $1 million a year. What we're seeking is 17,000 to have more of an emphasis in an area where there is more of a problem than the rest of the state is. Frankly, we'll keep talking to the federal government, we'll keep talking to the state government, but we want to do something more intensive. And it comes back to Colin's point about, I wouldn't ask the state government to run this program for every child across South Australia. Like, I wouldn't ask for 17,000 babies to be signed up to receive a book every month, to receive resources every month. But when I look at these statistics of this area, I'd say I'd do it here. And if we measure the results and it works, then I'd look at some other areas you might look at. But this is an intensive program. It's not a program for every community that every taxpayer would want to fund.
Thank you, Kate. Councillor Michael.
Thanks, Mayor Bill. Thanks for your presentation. So I've got two questions. The first one's a little bit maybe straightforward. So this is an opt-in scheme where, based on the number of people that access it, then that's what the funding ask is. The second question is, when I had a look at this with the Barossa Council, so they've got like a early child strategy that the council's developed that sort of sets out different layers of responsibility. But what I did notice is that these programs are under review at the Barossa Council. So have they taken up this opportunity or not?
So, Mel, do you want me to put you on the spot? Or do you want me to try, or do you just want to answer it? So this is Mel, who does the early years programs for the Barossa Council.
Am I breaking protocol?
No.
Okay. I'm Melissa Whitter. I'm the manager of library services at Barossa. Our early childhood programs aren't under review. They're constantly under some sort of review in terms of us looking at ways to improve them, ways to do better, ways to do more, ways to make them suit the community better and to get those strong outcomes for young people in the region. But there's no move to not be part of programs like this.
Okay, so because it said the service level was under review and I looked at the...
Yeah, that's just standard for us
an
to
ongoing
constantly
thing.
be in an ongoing way reviewing our service levels to make sure they meet the needs of the community. So there's no cuts to anything there. It's more tweaking around the edges to say what's working in one town, what's not working as well in another. How can we improve them?
But just on your first question, that's a really good point, because I'd love to see 100% of babies born here sign up for the program, but that's probably not realistic. So that's really a maximum of 17,000 a year, depending on how many of them sign up. And it's based a little bit on, some of you might be familiar, the Tamworth Council runs a program, the Dolly Parton Imagination Library, which is less intensive, less of the hands-on support, but they now get huge numbers signing up at birth, and they get sent a book every month until they reach school age, and it's grown and grown and grown. But even that, they wouldn't be anywhere near 100% sign up. So yeah, that's a top figure.
Councillor Colin.
Yeah, just it interests me how you're coming up with the data, the research, or how you're finding out, and what is it different in different parts of the council area? Is there
Yeah.
or it's universal across the whole lot?
No, it's actually broken down by town and by suburb. So the data is collected, and council should be receiving reports of the Australian Early Development Census.
Yeah, we've probably got it.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
So you put it.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's actually broken down But we can see that Kapunda is at what, 40%? So 40% of children in Kapunda are currently starting school, showing that they are already vulnerable on at least one of the 5 measurements. That's compared to 22% across the nation as the average.
But it surprises me that you don't have any idea why that is. Like it's frightening, isn't it? If you've got a town of 3,200 people, or whatever
Yeah.
we've got, and you've got no idea why the children going to school are, or 40% of them shouldn't be where they are. That's, well, that's an indictment on.
Yeah.
But when my kids went to kindergarten, they could read, they could write their name, they could do all those sort of things. But I did notice there was other kids that were still in nappies. I was so surprised it was.
Yeah.
So is it more of a social problem?
It's all of the above. So there's 5 different measurements that when they get to school, they'll be measured upon. So from social connection to emotional development, you know, how emotionally mature they are, to language development. And we expect that some of this will peak further because during COVID years, some of these things weren't getting picked up early, but that's true across the board. And I think your question about why is it happening, you know, that's actually the reason we need a specific place-based program focused here, so we can work with those families and work with those service providers on what it is and what are we lacking that we need, what isn't working that we can fix. And we can't do that. I can't do that sitting in Adelaide, work out what's going on in this community. That's why this is about bringing together the local service providers, and it's actually about Pepper doing the hard yards. So we're going to ask you that. Yeah.
Thank you, Kate. Anything further, councillors?
Yeah, through the
Councillor-
chair. I applaud again, once again, what you guys are doing. It's fantastic. I'd love to hear from the other person actually, who's been very quiet through this, but may or may not be a question for you. But
there you go, Jim.
you know, from the outside, it looks like we're targeting the symptoms, not the root cause. You know, a 0 to 5-year-old child, you can put as many books in front of them, they're not going to be able to read them without parental supervision and support. You know, in this community, if we've got dual parents working or whatever, their time, their available time outside of work is very limited, particularly in the fact that, you know, some of these people are working down towards Adelaide, so there's a couple of hours of travel time chewed up there type thing. Kids are, I guess, getting dropped into, you know, places like, you know, after school hours care or, you know, kindy, preschool, that sort of stuff. When they get picked up from there, they get taken home. What are they getting done? They're probably getting dropped in front of the TV while mum and dad cook dinner and do all that sort of stuff. So do we need to look at, you know, is it a generational thing where we should be targeting more the parents, teaching parents how to be parents, how to bring their kids up? And, you know, I understand what you're trying to do. And I think it's great that you're trying to involve parents in these support groups. But if they're already time poor, how, you know, it's the old adage of, you know, where do you sort of, you know, invest your time? You know, are we so busy cutting down trees, so to speak, that we don't have time to sharpen our axe, you know, to be more efficient?
Yeah.
You know, library hours, is that a consideration as well? You know, if the library's open, you know, during daytime hours, and perhaps parents are just struggling to get there at any time. We've got a fantastic library. I think we've got great library resources in the place. We've got great facilities for young kids. We've got, you know, excellent schools as well. But all of that is difficult to access for working parents. Simple as that. So, you know, there's been some I've seen some ads on TV, you know, talk to your kids, you speak to, that's you guys. So fantastic. And it makes it, you know, and it's catchy, it's in their face, and it targets the parents because that's when they're at home watching TV, bang, it's there in front of them. But converting that into visits to the library, converting it to, you know, visits to the support groups and things like that. And also, for parents that are a little bit proud to admit that you need to go to one of these support groups is a gigantic step. So, you know, and there's probably stigma attached to that. So it's about attacking that. So look, congratulations for what you're doing. I think it's fantastic. I don't know the answer. I hope you guys do. But you know, don't underestimate the massive challenge that you guys have got ahead of you.
I think you do know some of the answers though, because I mean, one of our biggest challenges is how do you run a program like this that isn't putting more guilt on the shoulders of parents that are working really hard and juggling a million things as it is, because that just gets them to tune out. So you actually need to have something that is kind of accessible. And that's why, so if we have a monthly package that's going to your child, that's something that a parent is actually going to pick up and find useful. But on the top of it, you've got information on, oh, did you actually know that if you do this, the result is this? You know, it's a friendly way that rather than having parents have to sign up and deal with stigma, that you can get that information. But the other thing is the most popular thing that we've produced when it comes to parents is sometimes we all assume that you have a baby and you just naturally know what to do with it. And that's not always true. So one of the things that parents loved the most was we came up with a deck of cards, and on each card, it had one really easy way without having to buy anything or do anything that you could interact in a different way with your baby. Because you get to the stage where you think, if I do one more game of peekaboo, I'm actually going to be sick. Like I can't. So it's just suggestions on things you can do. And when parents haven't had a decent sleep for 2 years and are trying to juggle work, that's the one thing they've said, I can do that. Like if you tell me specifically what I need to do and I need to do it 15 minutes for when I get home or whatever it is, I can do that. So sometimes it's just about making it easier and actually giving those suggestions. And I don't for a second say that we have all the answers. Like I'm not claiming that whatsoever. I'm not saying if we run this program in 5 years' time, Light is going to be leading the nation in terms of early childhood outcomes. But the evidence shows us that this is the best chance to actually turn it around. It is in the home, supporting the parents to support the child more. And if it doesn't work, I think we all say we tried based on the best evidence that we've got. And it's as simple as that. I'm not trying to overpromise at all, but I think we can make a difference. And we've seen that with other programs that we can.
Just one more question. Thanks, Councillor Simon.
Thanks, Mary Bill. Yeah, it's a great program that you run, and thanks for your enthusiasm and your compassion. It's a great thing. I was wondering, you were touching on that the state and the federal government have programs. I think it's an early learning strategy, that 50 million over 4 years from the state government, and then there's through the Department of Social Services, an early years strategy. I think it's $700 million in there. So there's a fair bit of spend that the federal and the state government does. So how do you guys work together with them? Do you work together with them? Is there some, or is the case of duplication, as Councillor Colin asked earlier?
Don't worry, we knock on everyone's doors. That's part of it's the great learning experience of my life, is going from being the one signing the checks to being the one begging for them. And we will, but I think it's about recognising that different areas do have different responsibilities. And the responsibility that has the biggest impact in results is what happens in people's homes. And that's the area where we have some councils, I mentioned Tamworth, but there's others who have said we're going to step in and fund these programs and these supports. But otherwise, it's pretty hit and miss sometimes. So the organised structures that governments control and own and regulate, they fund. But it's that support in the home that is, I think, the glue that is missing sometimes, and is where I think we can make the biggest difference. But we'll keep asking everyone for money, don't worry.
Thank you, Kate. And it's nice to have the Barossa over here as well. It just reinforces our great connection that we have between our two councils. Councillors, I'd like to seek leave of the meeting to perhaps, as a traditional way of doing business here, and bring item 13.1 forward if we can. And that will allow our guests to understand where we're coming from after their presentation tonight, which I must say has been absolutely excellent. So do I have someone move that way and we bring 13.1 forward? Okay, thanks, Councillor Peter. Someone like to second that? Councillor Lynette. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. So we bring 13.1, which is building early engagement and support pilot project. It's a recommendation down the bottom of page 41. Are there any questions, councillors? And I would commend your report, Pepper. I think you must have put many hours into putting all this together, or many months, I think, of experience in what you do. And it's given us a lot of evidence at least to make a decision on, which is what we're looking for around a council chamber. Councillors, there's a recommendation there. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Simon? Okay. Councillor Collin?
Well, I've just got a question, and Kate might be answered, but a 5-year program seems quite a while. But you seem to suggest that the results would be quite, or recorded and known quite quickly. Would you have any idea after 2 years?
Learning. The reason we've suggested 5 years is because you can actually do a study from birth until the time that those measurements are taken when that child reaches school. So if we're
You're
using,
going to reach school at 3 now, aren't they?
well, the Australian Early Development Census first measurement is taken at 5. So if that's what we're basing the problem on, then we would, in terms of an evidence base, we would have a cohort of children compared to the last cohort who was measured, who have had this program in place for their whole 5 years of life. So you would then be able to follow that cohort through their NAPLAN results compared to the cohorts that have come before them. So in terms of, there's some things you could measure after 2. You could measure how many people are using the library. You could measure if there was more cooperation amongst service providers. But if you actually really wanted the hard data, then you'd need to do the 5 years from birth until that child gets to school and gets measured.
Because there's going to be some of these people using the books for firewood.
Maybe we've
I'm not being, but there are people in this community that are not. The books are going to be there, but they're not going to. It doesn't matter what we do. I think you know what I'm trying to say, but.
Look, you've got Julia wrapped up now. She's been silent all meeting. She wants to say something. That's true, and yes, you can. But even if you've got books sitting around, it doesn't necessarily have to be the parents. It might be when the grandparents come and visit. It might be when the auntie or uncle, or it might be when the older siblings. Oh. Go on, say it again.
I was just going to say that what we've learned with our previous programs and other projects that we've delivered, it's the nag factor from kids. You know, the books are just a tool, really. So the children will receive the packs to their homes, and it's the nag factor to their parents or to their sibling. Like, what's in here? Show me. You know, opens them up. You know, wants to see them. So the siblings will be showing their little babies, but it's the tool. The book is really just the tool for that interaction to springboard into talking, into going on picture walks through the books, looking at colours, learning new words. It's all about it, you know, exposing children to language and to that back and forth interaction.
Councillor Simon?
Yes, I just wondered, at the bottom of the report, it says if this cost is budgeted, and obviously it's not because we didn't know about it, but then it says such as the funding sources as external organisations, businesses and grant funding. What's the likelihood of that happening, and what sort of grant funding and businesses is meant by that, or external organisations? So where's that money potentially coming from for us? I mean, there's nothing. Yeah.
Right. So through the chair, I can help answer that one. So Mel and I with Raising Literacy Australia have created a proposal as well that we're looking to go out to external organisations, businesses, to try and get their support into helping to fund this program for their communities as well. So that's what we're looking there at going. We need that $17,000 to get this up. But if we can help get those funds in from external companies or organisations, those that are looking at the social responsibility side of things, that's what we're also looking at too, to help bring that funding in.
Thank you, Pepper.
Yeah, through the chair, I guess there's probably some other opportunities from businesses that are doing renewable energy projects in our precinct that are looking at community benefit sharing programs. So I think this would certainly fit well with their objectives in terms of social outcomes. So that's something that I think we'll definitely table with them as an investment opportunity for them as well.
Thank you, Corinne. Further questions, councillors?
Can I just clarify one thing on that point? So the 17,000 is the cohort of children born in 2025 to receive this program every year until they reach school. If we want to then add the children who are born in 2026 and 2027 and 2028, then we need to attract funding from elsewhere to do that. We've actually seen it work really effectively in other parts of Australia, that where it's a localised, there are lots of local service providers or businesses that might want to step in and do that. But the one good thing about having really bad statistics is it makes it easier for us to find other people to put in funding in Light as well, which is harder, sorry, Mel, in Barossa. But, that's the only good thing, is that we've got real evidence to show the need, and we will keep working to try and attract further funding and further grants to support more families in your area.
Thank you, Kate.
They still get their cats visit when at home visit when they're 6 weeks.
With
Councillors, are there further questions?
yeah, through the chair, and just to that point that you made, so this is like a 5-year commitment. If it is deemed successful, though, you mentioned you'd kind of look at extending it beyond that 5 years. At what point does it become like just a infinite sort of legacy type item that the council ends up wearing? I'm just not sure. I've got to be realistic. The council that we see sitting around here might not be the ones that are sitting here in 10 years' time. Probably not. So do we? Then we're in a position where it'd have to be a very brave person to vote against it.
And that's why we always refer to it as a pilot program. Like we are a small charity. We're putting 100 grand on the table because we want to collect the data, and we want it to be compelling enough that we can go to wider funding sources and say, you should roll this program out more broadly. Frankly, that's why we're doing it. So if it is successful and the results are that good, then we would have the evidence for other bigger funding sources to come in and fund that moving forward.
Would that essentially mean that you guys are committed to for the long haul?
Yeah.
Or is there going to get to a stage where in say 10 years time, I'll use that figure again, but 10 years time, you can say, you know what, Light Regional Council has now turned around that well, that we're going to pull our funding back?
Well, none of my board members are here to hear me say this, but I will, I'll pretend they're listening anyway. We've made a commitment for 5 years. Our board has committed to 5 years. So we have not committed beyond 5 years because we actually want to see the evidence. And our hope is that we see the evidence and say, this is so compelling that we don't want to just continue this program, that we want to roll it out in every council area across Australia that has statistics which are 10% higher than the national average. That's where we want to be. If we've got a program that we prove works, then we will use that evidence to get funding and to expand it.
Councillors, Councillor Michael.
Just to clarify that though, so I mean, again, this is an opt-in arrangement, right? So there's no guarantee that 100% of the people that worked that figure up from will take it up, and the ones that are disinterested and would use it will not use it anyway or aren't likely to take it up. And then the second point is that to Councillor Fabio's point, I mean, it would be for a future council or even this council to determine whether or not this continues to feature in the budget each time the budget's prepared. Isn't that the case? Yeah, so.
That same goes for a lot of decisions that we make, Councillor Michael. Anything further, councillors? Well, if there's nothing further there, we've got a recommendation about 2/3 of the way down page 41. Is someone prepared to move that recommendation? Councillor Dean, second. Would like to speak to it, Councillor Dean?
I think all the points have been made very well, and it's clearly needed. And I see that as an initial way to do an improvement in an area where it badly needs it. To get some good evidence, it really has to be done, in my view.
Thanks very much, Councillor Dean. Councillor Lynn, your second. Would you like to speak to that? Thank you. Anything further, councillors? Questions or comments? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. I think we've worked out doing nothing is not an option. And I think now that we can start on this journey and raise the profile of our towns in our region here, and particularly Kapunda, the statistics are frightening, and we just don't want to do nothing. And tonight we did something. And I think the councillors, in due respect, asked some very, very good questions. So they've been responsible financially with ratepayers' money. So I think that's a very important aspect. But we've got a really great outcome, and I'm looking forward to Pepper's reports in the future. We've put all the pressure on Pepper now, but I think the connection with the Barossa too is very important. So I thank you very much for tonight, and we really appreciate it. And safe drive home and Merry Christmas. The councillors have got to put up with me for 2 more. Well, councillors, we can get back into our normal business now. We have no adjourned business. Thank you, Jordan. Thank you. Right. Oh, you'll be back. Good. Into action items, councillors. Anything on page 7? Page 8? Page 9? Page 10? Page 9? Page 8?
Just about Clare Road, I see meetings scheduled with ward councillors to discuss concept plan.
Through the chair, that's to be scheduled.
Yeah,
Yep.
but why only ward councillors? Is that all councillors or that's
Apologies, all councillors can attend. It'll be open invitation.
Yeah, right. I just thought the wording, I thought you just meant the Dutton ward members or something.
I think it was originally Dutton ward members as we discussed it, but in further discussions, we were going to leave it open to any interested elected member.
Good. Yeah.
Thank you, Megan. Anything further on that one, councillors? If not, page 9, page 10, and page 11. And now we move into our reports from our committees. The first one being section 10, the infrastructure and sustainability reports. First one being the road assessment renewal and maintenance program for November 2024. Another good addition to our agenda, I think, each month. Councillors, I think you'd agree. It's really good to see these figures there to get some understanding of what's been done with our regional roads in particular. Any questions on that, councillors? Thanks, councillor. That's the recommendation is on page 15, about halfway down the page. Move to Councillor Lynn. Would you like to speak to it? Someone like to second that? Councillor Bill, like to speak to that, Councillor Bill? No? Any further questions or comments? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? All those in favour, again, thanks. Those against? Motion's carried. Thanks, councillors. Now we move into section 11, our strategy and economic development reports. There's been a great body of work here done by Kyron's department, and we're very grateful for that because it certainly opens the eyes to what's happening around the place and how and where we're sort of positioned in many of these places. And, we've seen some startling statistics, but much of it very good. It's making sure that we're doing our job in a tourism and economic development sense. There's one note on page 24, for example, under tourism, it suggests that it accounts for 4.4 of industry value had in 2022-23. However, visitor numbers have increased by over 50% since 2010, driven by day trip visitors from Adelaide. And there's one more reason. That was the year I was elected. That's a fair reason. It's about as funny as buffaloes burning babies, I know. Any questions, councillors?
Right, yeah.
Councillor Collins?
Yeah, so, yeah, you just read page 24, but page 25, it goes on to say that tourism is only 3.2% of the total GDP. So, but one question I'd like to ask, it talks about agriculture, manufacturing, construction and wholesale trade. And it says these industries should be supported by the council, but how are we doing that?
Yeah, through the chair. So typically the next step after these economic analysis reports are to engage with stakeholders just to seek feedback on what they believe council's role should be and how those industries should be supported. So that is exactly the question that we would pose to the community and stakeholders and obviously council.
Thanks, Colin.
It just strikes me that, as I said, it's tourism with a 3.2% of the GDP, agriculture at 35. And then, it does say tourism accounts for total industry, 4.4, but agriculture is probably well over 50%, supporting industry. And we've got 2 full-time staff in tourism. That's 3% of GDP. And we've got no staff in the agricultural sector or any other sector. So why do we have 2 employees for 3% of GDP? It just seems out of whack to me. And if we're going to continue down this way, why don't we maybe levy tourist operators to pay for the services provided by us? Because surely industry is self-supporting. Like the agriculture industry doesn't ask for much. We pay our rates, we get our road supplied. Tourism pay their rates, they get their road supplied, but they also get 2 full-time employees. I'm just wondering, that seems out of whack to me for the small amount of GDP that they produce. I'm not saying they're poor, it struck me that why we're investing that much, and what is the reason for that?
Anyone want to take that one on?
Yeah, I think probably the other measures aren't just around GDP and direct sales. So I think the other couple of points that come out of the insights is the role of tourism for employers, local residents, particularly women. So that makes up 10% of employment in our area for females, and also the youth, so that 15 to 24 year age bracket, which tourism takes up 15% of the local jobs.
What are they? It says the rule that the youth employment 15.4. What jobs are they?
Yeah, through the chair. So there's about 17 different industry codes that make up the tourism type services and businesses. So that's anything that ranges from, accommodation and food services, probably the major provider, but it goes down to rental, hiring, real estate markets for, Airbnb, well, not Airbnb, but, temporary accommodation, those sorts of things. So there's 17 different sort of categories that is applied to the visitor economy or tourism sector. So it's probably a bit more broader than what the local understanding of what tourism is. So yeah, there's actually a good video that's been prepared by the Tourism Industry Council of SA. That's a 2-minute video that sort of helps understand what that visitor economy is and how we can support it. So that's probably a good thing to share.
15% sounds a bit high to me, but is that counting people like Mo and people like restaurants and things like that? Is it? Well, they're not all tourism jobs, are they? So that's a bit misleading. So, but why can't we make the tourism industry pay for itself?
Yes, through the chair, there's probably different funding and revenue generating options that exist internationally and interstate on that very subject. Something that I guess the Barossa Partnerships Group was exploring at one point was revenue models through accommodation providers, so that a percentage of every room booking in an area went to a specific fund. That does require some legislational support from the state government to achieve that in South Australia. So that was something that's being looked at into a couple of years ago, but there's certainly some challenges at the legislational perspective for those sorts of things.
It just reads to me that we've been chucking a lot of money at tourism, and it's still only 3%. So basically, every residential person and prime producer has been subsidising a industry which hasn't. Everyone is going to be the great. It's going to be the great thing that's going to drive the economy. It was 3% 15 years ago. It just hasn't grown, and we've spent all this money, and it just so how do we account for the money we're spending? I don't think we are. It just seems to be spent with it's not reconciled against anything really, is it? So do we just keep spending it? Do we just keep?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Corrin. Councillor Lynn?
I'm just particularly thankful for the way that Sky and Gemma have upgraded the tourist area in Freeling in the Railway Park and upgrading the signage. It's beautifully done, and they rang me to say what did I want changed, and I felt that was a really good job by our staff.
Thanks very much, Lynn. That's well said. Anything further, councillors? Councillor Simon?
Thanks, to the Mayor. I've got a couple of things, but first is the question. So since when do we actually do economic development? Since when has council has an economic development department?
What was the question again?
Since when does Light Regional Council have an economic development department? Yes, since when?
Oh. Well, I came over here and I think about the mid-90s, and I was the Tourism and Economic Development Manager then. So it's been a long time.
2015?
Yeah, the department in a specific sense was 2015, but council has been undertaking economic development services for much longer than that.
It's longer.
So the reason why I ask is obviously to come back a little bit to what Councillor Collins said about the tourism and the investment. So economic development is defined as growing the living standard. Let's say like you invest money into growing the living standard, and the way to measure that obviously is GDP. In our case, it would be GRP, but that's going to be a bit tricky. But then an easy one to measure, and we have some measurements here, some metrics, is obviously household income or personal income. So you would expect, and another really important thing about economic development is it usually starts with spending money, but the idea is that acts as an accelerator or like a catalyst for more economic spending. So if you spend $1 million, you want to see $3, $4, $5, $10 million of economic activity coming out of that $1 million spending. That's the premise of economic development. So if you look, and I'm just looking at those tables that we've been supplied here. If you look at, for example, the median household income, it says there's some sort of growth, which is the light region, and it's South Australia. If you look at it, the above average that South Australia has, light region has over the South Australian average is constant over since 2006 to now. So obviously, we haven't been able to grow anything. It's just a constant that it's always been there, because somewhere between 2006 and 2021, we started doing economic development. These figures here don't show that, and the same with the personal income. And we can look at the gross regional product growth. There's absolutely no trend in anywhere between 2002 and 2023 where you can see that, oh, we started economic development, anything's happened. So my point really is that, which is a bit similar to what Councillor Collins says, we're spending all this money, but I personally have no idea if we're actually getting the accelerator effect or the catalyst effect, which economic development needs to do. Otherwise, it's pointless. I mean, I can spend $1 million for somebody to dig a hole, and then fill it back in again. And yes, I've increased $1 million worth of economic development, but that's pointless. I want to spend $1 million and then see $10 million of economic activity. That is the point of economic development. Now, I'm just really questioning that. And that obviously dovetails with the motion that we're going to have later, because I really want to understand how this economic development acts, like the bang for the buck. We're spending this much money, how much development we're getting out of it. I think that's super important. And this report is very, very thorough, but nowhere in there is anything that's convincing to me that we're actually achieving any of that. So, and specifically with the tourism, as Councillor Collin pointed out, 3%, the amount of money we're spending on 3% of the economy is really quite out of whack when you think in that the primary industries or manufacturing has 30%, and we don't really spend much money on them. So that is quite.
Thanks, Councillor Simon. Anything further, councillors? Anything further? There's a recommendation on page 30, about halfway down the page, that the council receives. Councillor Lynn. Like to speak to it? Would someone like to second that recommendation on halfway down page 30? Councillor Dean, like to speak to that? I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thanks, councillors. And thanks for the debate. It's going to be an ongoing debate. But I guess one thing we can look at, I don't think there's a state in Australia that doesn't have a tourism commission, so that they must think that it's valuable. I think Australian tourism in general, it's been very good to this nation, and they have to spend a lot of money, of course, to develop it. And maybe some of their stats don't look that good either, but it's made this country the way it is. And I don't know if you can put a value on that. Councillor Collin.
Oh, I 100% agree with everything you said, Bill, but you've got to have result-based spending.
Oh, you can. I guess sometimes it depends. It swings and roundabouts how you look at that the value of that. Is it always in just sheer dollar terms, in sheer GDP, or is it in social terms and in other terms as well, employment, all those sorts of things that are attached to that.
But they all, that's what GDP is. That's what the gross domestic. That's what it all trying to capture the whole thing. So it is. You're totally right. But the thing is, why does one industry get supported by the others? That's
yeah. I'm not sure if that's exactly right, but it might seem that way, but I don't think it is. Anyway, section 12, councillors, reports for information. First one there is Richard's agenda for or diary for November, or from about mid-November for last council meeting on to today's date. Any questions there or comments, councillors? I think this is a very open way of doing business too, that just gives everyone an idea of what's been going on at that level. 12.2 is a customer satisfaction action plan, quarterly update. Oh, sorry, Councillor Collin.
I see that you met with Twin Creek Wind Farm. I'm just wondering how you went with that.
Yeah, thank you. That was really about what Kyron touched on, which was about the sort of the benefit sharing and the community consultation that they will be undertaking.
So there was no update of construction, or even if they're putting in when are they going to put in their application?
Yep, that's everything on their website at the moment is consistent with what they spoke to us about. So they're getting ready for that.
On their website, their application.
They're a bit behind on their dates on
the application
website.
was meant to be in July or June.
Yeah, they're basically getting prepared for that.
So they still haven't done it right.
Anything further, councillors, on that? If not, we'll move on to section 12.2, the customer satisfaction action plan quarterly update. Are there any questions there, councillors? So, Councillor Simon.
Yeah, just a couple of comments. So it says in here that several milestones have already been achieved, and obviously one of those milestones is the revised customer service chart. But I find it a bit I do have a problem with calling that a milestone because, and I pointed out last time, all we're doing is changing the wordage of a charter. It has no effect on what's actually going. The issue that we have and the customer satisfaction survey clearly said that 75% of our customers are not satisfied with our service. So just changing the wordage in a customer service charter and believing this is going to do anything, because the problem is systemic. The problem is a cultural problem. The problem is much deeper. It's an institutional problem that we have. Just changing the word in a charter, calling that a milestone, is like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. It really has no impact. It's just like it's quite pointless. It really is. And then further down, there's another sentence that just it almost frustrates me. It says, initiatives such as enhanced community engagement. So we're talking about enhanced community engagement, which is a great thing, through the public consultation policy review. So if you really take those words in, that means if we review the consultation policy, then we enhance public engagement. How is that possible? How is by reviewing a policy, how does that enhance the engagement? If you really listen to those words, that's close to nonsensical. We need to do something about it, not just exact like rearrange chairs on the deck on the Titanic. It just seems frustrating to me. But I pointed that out last time. And, I'm still, I still voted for the charter because it's fine. But I just think we need to go a lot further than that.
Thanks, Richard.
Yeah, no, look, I agree with you. Yeah, culturally, rudeness is an issue. You're quite right. The milestone's been achieved. It's as simple as that. We've put a list together of things that we aim to do, and we are working our way through doing them. So, if there is a different word you'd like me to use, I'm, completed. I'm happy to use that. That we've completed something, but the reality is there is a document there that we are working our way through. I'm not seeing what the issue is. I would have thought, a congratulations or well done on working your way through those things so far would have been more appropriate.
Councillor Michael.
Yeah, just I guess with Councillor Simon's comment around updating the policy, I think we approved those changes, didn't we? And so at least that's a public facing commitment from the council that says, I can't remember what we'll respond within 48 hours to whatever. You get an acknowledgement email. I think those are positive actions, provided that that there's a follow through. And I guess that, we'll see the results of that when we get the survey next year or whenever it comes. But
Thanks, Councillor Michael.
Yeah, well, just in responding to that, I think our aim is to try and create the system so we can report that we have received and actually got back and closed matters out within those timeframes. But at the moment, our system doesn't allow that to occur as easy as it should. I'm hoping for some reporting back to me in January, and then I'm hoping to be able to start reporting to the elected body once I get those reports right and have confidence that they are accurate and reflect what our behaviours are.
Councillor Collins.
Yeah, I haven't got much of a problem with it, but the main thing I want to get out of that survey and when it goes to it is, you look at the table that was presented to us in the all wards and, roads, stormwater, footpaths, public lighting and planning and development were the four structural things that we have to concentrate on. So the service delivery is a very small component of it, in my opinion, because when the survey was done, they said the first interaction with council was good, but the core problem was later. That's delivery. So that's actually a structural problem rather than so I think you've got to get that right, and then we've got to get the things that were high priority for the constituents of Light Regional Council. I think that's what we really have to focus on and not lose focus on that, worrying about the fluffy stuff.
Thanks, Councillor Collins. Anything further, councillors? Not. We can move on to 12.3 is the fund a district centre car park fund, and thanks Craig for raising this again or putting it on our agenda as well. We don't want this to be lost. It's still there, and it's obviously a work in progress, or remains a work in progress. Any questions in relation to that, Councillor Simon?
There's another question. So it does say that, so first of all, when the motion was passed in January 24, so we're almost a year in, and even before that motion, we've already sort of said that doing that scheme and fund would be a really advantageous thing to do, because I think it's a good thing to have that scheme and fund, because it allows some development that otherwise wouldn't be possible. So I think it's a great thing. So I'm just wondering, the reason it seems to me that why we're not doing it or can't do it at this point, it seems like the reason given is that we are waiting for tailored guiding advice. So to me, it just seems like we've been waiting for a year or so. To me, it seems, I wonder what's actually going on.
Thank you.
Thank you for that through the chair. No, they've hit it spot on. It's a legal process, and we need some guiding advice from the state about how we're to implement and execute a change. We've sourced legal advice on this going right back into the earlier history of this matter, which confirmed the same. My engagement with the state showed some progress in that direction. And then that sort of petered out, if you will. That's my words, not theirs. Because there have been other priorities which I've referred to in the report. Look, the housing roadmap, some of the initiatives around facilitating and encouraging growth in new forms of housing has been a real key feature of the last 6 months and will be ongoing. We're getting regular updates coming through from the Commission with focused policy in that space. But I am aware that other councils are asking about this offset scheme and funding aspect. So I don't think it's going to drop away. It's just that we have had to wait, and we unfortunately will have to continue to do so until we get that direction. But my plan will be, as soon as we have that guidance about what we need to do, I can prepare another report and say this is what will be involved. Just in case also there's any funding or other resourcing that might need to be tailored to that, Mr. Mayor. So yeah, it's unfortunate we have to sort of put it onto a bit of a hiatus for the time being, certainly not a preference, but we are requiring that advice to be able to do it properly.
Yeah, thanks so much, Craig. I think that's good work, and it's nice to see that it's being addressed as best it can.
Yeah, I'd love to address it.
Thank you. Anything further, councillors, on that one?
That's okay.
Oh, Councillor Collin?
Yeah, so I think when we first looked at this, we were, before even we had it so we could actually refund the people who were doing it, an application for a car park or putting the funds. So we were going to do that to start with, weren't we? So that was 2 years ago, nearly, rather than a year. But can we do this without the state? Like because it is in the legislation. So why can't we just read the legislation in our own way without having the state government, or what? You can write your own and put in an application, or you can't do that.
So through the chair, the history goes right back, if you're right, to adoption of the original under the Development Act. But as far as the process to actually implement what's in the legislation, yeah, we need some guiding advice on that. That was our legal advice going right back over the history of this matter.
Yeah, but the legal advice was to get rid of the existing one. That was the first hurdle.
Yeah.
Making the second one is actually, it's legislated we can do it, isn't it? Because I was reading the Act, I thought the way I sort of read it, we could do it. So can we have two? Can we open up another one and then just park the one we've got now? So then you've actually got,
through the chair, sorry, that is the idea, yes. So the legacy one, there's no way to wind up the legacy one. So the one that we do now, the new one would replace it.
Yep.
And the advantage of that would be you'd have the two components, a fund and then a scheme that goes with it. And the main advantage to that is that we can update it.
Yeah,
but you're asking about process. I understand.
Yeah,
that. Look, going back in terms of the advice, and again, I'm going from memory. Yeah, we can undertake a process. We can look to do this. The risk in doing it that way is it's not accepted. It doesn't tick the boxes at the other end when we ask the minister to sign off on that. That's why we've asked for direction in terms of what the minister and his department are looking for as far as process is concerned. So I'm trying to mitigate the risk of going down a path only to find that we haven't ticked the box somewhere undertaking a particular process. we are in an unusual situation here and not having those guiding steps. There's a risk involved in progressing this without that sort of information as well.
Because we did have a time frame on the, I can't remember what the time frame was, but there was a time frame on applications, wasn't there? That we're
In
gonna get
terms of
refunded.
the subsidy,
Yeah,
yeah, that went through to December 2025 from memory.
so we're gonna have to extend it. Because this is not gonna get done, is it? Like, it's 2 years now, so it's not gonna get, and you're saying that the government's, attention is elsewhere, so maybe in a future meeting, we're gonna have to put an extension on the existing arrangement that we have. Otherwise, we're gonna get caught short with someone putting in an application and they're gonna get stuck with 17 car parks or 55 grand, so should that be looked at in the new year?
Through the chair, it's a matter of policy. It could be extended as a policy decision of council, no different to what happened in terms of the motion on notice that was turned into an adjustment to the policy back in February. Yeah.
Could you just make a note of that, please, that we could look at it next year, like if,
Yeah, sure.
to when it expires, that if we have to extend it, we will?
Yeah.
Because it looks like we will, in my opinion. I'd like it to continue.
No, we can do that.
Thank you.
Thanks, councillor Collins. Thanks, Craig. Anything further, councillors, on that one? If not, we move on to 12.4, the proposed character preservation overlay code amendment. Any questions on that one, councillors? Pretty straightforward. 12.5, Greater Adelaide Regional Plan. What we heard report. Interesting one too. Any further questions or any questions or comments, I should say, councillors? If not, we'll move on to 12.6, Department for Infrastructure, Transport and Transport Strategy Consultation. Poor old Craig, gee, we're going to give it to you tonight, aren't we? Any questions or comments on this particular report, councillors? It's keeping us informed, that's for sure. If not, we'll move on to 12.7, the Employment Land Supply. Any questions on the employment land supply? Any questions or anything we would like to raise or weren't aware of? Councillor Collins?
Oh, so pretty well we're doing nothing, like it's nothing we can do in the near term. Or
Through the chair, yeah, the advice is the advice, isn't it? I'm still interested in pursuing the idea of a growth strategy in terms of informing a number of elements, but as far as initiating the sort of changes that we might want to be in the form of a code amendment, it would seem that we would have to hit a few marks in terms of being able to present that in a way that the state would entertain, particularly if we're looking at employment land supply across the entirety of Greater Adelaide. I think that we have to look at the monitoring of the information that goes through on the portal and pick our timing on that one, unfortunately.
Thank you.
so I know some businesses that do want to expand in the town, and also know some businesses that want to come to the town, but they can't. It's not industrial land, so it's a bit of a worry.
Thanks, Councillor Collins. Councillor Lynn?
I've just had a query from somebody in Freeling that would like to change his light industry parcel of land to residential, but he's been told that he can't because there's no water. It's a water issue in Freeling. They can't get new water till 2028. So that can't he can't extend. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Lynn. That's pretty alarming, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's nothing, nothing to comment on that. Yeah. Yeah, thanks for raising it, Councillor Lynn. It's just one of those horrible things that we're going to have to try and deal with somehow. These poor people have got land and want to do something with it, and the department hasn't got any money.
That's right.
To buy some taps. Oh, well, we'll move on now, councillors, to section, pardon me, we've got a recommendation down the bottom of page 40, I nearly missed it, that the reports for information be received and the contents herein be noted by council. Someone like to move that way? Thanks, Councillor Michael. Someone like to second that? Councillor Ellison. Any further comments or questions? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thanks, councillors. We move on to reports for decision. We've dealt with 13.1. Move on now to, it's 13.2 would be next, wouldn't it?
13.2. Where's 13.1?
13.2 is the youth incentive scheme applications. And great work by Lorinda. Are there any questions? There's a recommendation about a third of the way down page 47. Any questions, councillors, on that recommendation? Councillor Michael?
I'm happy to move it. Yeah, Bill.
Oh, thanks, Councillor Michael. I'd like to speak to that? No? Yes?
No, look, I think very briefly, I think this is a good thing that the council does and the ratepayers do to, to support people in our community to go and achieve good things, and it's great to see them coming in.
Yeah, thanks for that positive sort of spin. That's excellent. Someone like to, like to second that? Second to Councillor Simon. Any further, I'd like to speak to it, Councillor Simon. Any further questions or comments? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? That's carried. Thanks, councillors, and that's great to see. Yes. Councillors, you'd be aware that another item we have in confidence is the Citizen of the Year and the Community Event of the Year, and all those decisions that we need to make tonight. And we've got some staff members here, and rather than perhaps have them wait till the end of the meeting where it would be scheduled, I'd like to seek leave of the meeting that we bring that matter forward. Just trying to think what number it is. It's 18.3. Is there any appetite for that, councillors, to bring it forward? Councillor Simon, someone like to second that? I think Councillor Collins seconded that, I'm sure he did. Thanks, Councillor Collins. Any comment or questions? If not, we'll bring bring 18.3 forward, the $2025 Citizen of the Year Award. But first of all, we must go into confidence in order to do that. 13.3, councillors, policy review, treasury management policy. There's a recommendation about halfway down the page 51. Are there any questions or comments, councillors? Happy to move? Would you like to speak to it? Okay. Happy to second. Thanks, Councillor Peter. Move, Councillor Simon. Seconded, Councillor Peter. Any comments or questions, councillors? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Those against? And that's carried. Thanks, councillors. And thanks for your report, Nigel. The policy review, prudential management policy. Another one there with the recommendation about halfway down page 53. Move, Councillor Fabio. Would you like to speak to that, Councillor Fabio? No. Councillor Michael, would like to speak to that? No. Any comments or questions, councillors? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Councillor Collins? Okay.
But just on point 2, I just would like that explained to me. Point 3. In the executive summary.
No, I don't think it's an executive summary, and there's no point 3 in the recommendation.
Are we doing 13.4?
Yeah.
So there's an executive summary and it says an amended definition of a project to exclude developer construction assets transferred to council and projects funded by and undertaken on behalf of the governments. I'm just wondering what the governments mean, and I just would like it explained to me, that's all.
Okay, that's a fair question. Nigel, could you just put some clarity around that?
The review was to make it perfectly clear to managers what was actually covered within a prudential policy requirement project. And one of the things that was obvious to be excluded was where developers are handing over infrastructure assets. There will be many through Roseworthy that's not a project that would ordinarily be covered by prudential policy, because you already got significant amounts of checks and balances there to ensure that the assets are sound. In terms of the second part of it, it generally tried to catch projects that are 100% funded by other levels of government. And that can come in various manners. But if you read in the detail of the report, what it doesn't exclude is having comprehensive due diligence in terms of any of those to ensure that you intend to accept those monies and spend them appropriately. I think there was some discussions about some major road projects in recent times. It's certainly within your prerogative to do that, but not necessarily through this mechanism. That said, the Act provides, regardless of the circumstances, regardless of the financial thresholds, if you feel that there's any time where you think a prudential policy is required, that's outside this policy, you're perfectly within the law to actually request us to do one. And we've done them in the past where they're below the thresholds that the first strategic land was below the threshold. We still had a comprehensive prudential report covering it because of the nature of the purchase. Correct.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Connor. Thanks, Nigel. Any further questions, councillors? If not, I put the recommendation. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thanks, councillors. And Colin. Come. 13.5, Audit and Risk Committee appointment of independent members. There's a recommendation about halfway down the page again. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Michael? Like to speak to that, Councillor Michael?
No, look, only very briefly, I think the two candidates that have been proposed look quite good in terms of their experience and what they can potentially add to the Audit and Risk Committee. So I was pretty happy with it.
Thanks, Councillor Michael. Would someone like to second the motion? Councillor Fabio? Like to speak to it, Councillor Fabio?
I echo everything Michael just said, having been on that committee now for a while.
Yeah.
So, yep.
Yeah, thank you for that. Any further questions or comments, councillors? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. And we've got two new members of our Audit and Risk Committee and Uncle Ross to continue as chair. 13.6, the Governance Advisory Panel appointment of terms of reference. We have a recommendation once again about halfway down the page. Any comments or questions, councillors? Councillor Michael? Thanks, Councillor Michael. Move, Councillor Michael. Would someone like to second that? Councillor Lynn, would you like to speak to that? Any questions or comments, councillors? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. I think we were one of the first councillors, if not the first council in the state, to appoint our own advisory panel, and we've got three outstanding people involved in that as well. So it's good to see it continuing. 13.7, policy review dog registration refund policy. There's a recommendation about halfway down page 60. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Dean, someone like to second that? Would you like to speak to it? Someone like to second that? Councillor Michael, Councillor Bill. Councillor Bill, I think you're first. Would you like to speak to it? Straightforward. Any comments or questions, councillors? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thanks, councillors. We're on to questions on notice. I think we just go straight through to this one first. Yeah, I think we just do this, Councillor Fabio, then we'll catch up with those confidential matters. Questions on notice. The first one, 14.1, is the Torts Road. Question on notice from Councillor Michael. You'd like to comment on that, Councillor Michael?
No, I understand there's going to be a brief presentation, Mayor Bill, so I'll leave it for that.
Yeah, thank you. Corin and Megan will provide a brief presentation on where we're up to with Torts Road.
Thank you, Councillor Michael, for the question. What we've done is put the presentation in two parts, given your question was in two parts. So what we have, planned maintenance activity. So what we've got is just a rundown of what we have done and what we are continuing to do with Torts Road. Now, the classification of Torts Road is actually a Class 2 road, but what we're dealing, or how we're dealing with it is as a Class 1 road, because we recognise that it functions a little bit more as a Class 1 road. To do that, we've increased our grading frequency to 4 times a year. It doesn't need to be 4, it can be 2 to 4. If I go through the statistics, we've actually done consistently 4 times a year. Some years have actually been a little bit more, up to 6. When there's an event on, when I say an event, a rain event coming that we're aware of, we'll do an inspection prior and do one afterwards to see how the road has, or the drains have performed. That's something we will continue to also do. We have inspected the infrastructure, including the DIT infrastructure, because that's where some of the blockages might have taken place. Now, DIT are actually also working with us to repair some of their they had a collapsed drain. When we spoke with them last week, they were actually still waiting for their contractor to go out on site to rectify that. So that's down towards Clancy Road, goes under Redbanks Road. We're also looking to put in an additional drain across Redbanks Road. It'll be our asset, but further up. There is a drain that exists also in that area that we unblocked for them and created a bund to make sure the water was diverted to that drain, not further down on the northern side of Redbanks Road. So that's what we're going to continue to do. And I'll go on to the next part of timing of the upgrade for Torts Road.
Thanks, Megan. Yeah, so just with the timing of upgrades, what are the main considerations here? So there's several infrastructure deeds that operate over the Roseworthy Township expansion area, of which Torts Road bisects north-south. So land management agreements tie 3 particular infrastructure deeds to those landowner obligations. There's the road infrastructure deed, the social infrastructure deed, and the stormwater deed, and they are consistent across all landowners and developers. And what we're talking about here is the road infrastructure deed. The deed itself is quite complex, and it is very text heavy. So what we've tried to do is distill down the key obligations in that road infrastructure deed on the map that's been placed on your table. So it's a bit of an easier read, and I guess it graphically represents where the intervention points are and what their triggers are. And there's a table in the deed that articulates that in a more complex way. So there's about 10 road interventions that preside across the area. The ones of interest relating to Torts Road are intervention 17, and that's its upgrade to a sealed collector. And the key trigger point there is at 1,700 allotments created in the township expansion, or if a developer is indeed accessing Torts Road via its subdivision activity and developing adjacent. There's another intervention south, so at the intersection of Torts Road and Redbanks Road, which requires a roundabout to be installed, and that trigger point is also at that 1,700 allotment threshold. That one there, Edwards Road. So that will remain open, but essentially the requirement to it is, yes, it's a dead end at Horrocks Highway, and that will remain. Correct. It will continue to only be an exit to Redbanks Road. And yeah, this is the roundabout that requires an upgrade with a lot more traffic movements.
Corin, can I just ask you a question? Well, there's two roundabouts there by the looks, but we'll talk about the Redbanks. What's that one
So
right down the
The one
bottom?
in the north?
Yeah, down number 3. That's a roundabout there too? Yeah, near Xavier. Not a roundabout? It says upgrade with roundabout.
Intervention 3.
One there, Xavier, car in the off-ramp.
Yeah, down.
Oh,
It
yes,
says roundabout on.
yes, yep.
Yeah.
So that's another
Okay, so there's
upgrade that's
there's
required.
two proposed roundabouts now. With all the road trains and whatnot that come through there with cattle and the terrible job that they did over on the other highway with the roundabout, that's still terrible. What sort of roundabout's going to go in for these two? Because just yesterday I watched a road train come in off of the expressway, and I know that it's over the bridge, but Williston, I had to pull back and stop so that he could turn sharply and then come up over the bridge to head out Redbanks Road. And I'm just interested to know how that's going to work, because it wasn't a good look. And there's so many. No, well, yesterday's one was a freight truck, but I've been watching all the massive big cattle trucks coming through there at the minute. And I'm just really interested to see now that there's going to be roundabouts in there, how that's going to work for these massive cattle trucks without anyone tipping over.
Yeah, I guess both Redbanks Road is a Department of Infrastructure and Transport road, so they'll be required to approve the design.
Well, look what they
and
did out on the other road, and that turned into a major, and it's still a major issue. I'm still hearing about how bad it is.
Yeah, so in short, it's a Department of Infrastructure and Transport matter. So moving on to the next slide, which is sort of some indication of timing of those developer deed obligations. So with regard to that 1,700 allotment trigger, going at the current rate of development that the township expansion is going at, that wouldn't occur until about 2029, 2030, or potentially later, depending on some SA water infrastructure, trunk infrastructure requirements. So that's still about 5 years away. A developer could choose to upgrade that road earlier if it suits their needs. So that's something that could play out in that sort of meantime prior to the 1,700 lot trigger. There are some other considerations, predominantly service provision down Twarts Road. It's a key road corridor for services. So we're talking gas, power, communications, and probably more importantly, SA water infrastructure upgrades. So state government, through its housing roadmap and tranche 1 works, are currently they're currently estimating some key potable water trunk mains and sewer mains going down Twarts Road to be completed about mid-2027. So I guess the question for council in terms of upgrading Twarts Road, would you upgrade it in advance of those services going in? I certainly, if you did, it would there'd be a fair old mess to reinstate the road thereafter. So that's a key consideration. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
All I'm just going to say, the roads that what else you built more than comfortable. Look this time.
That's an interesting, if I can, maybe that's an interesting point in itself.
Sorry. Look, these are all issues, that exist whilst the area is growing within, when there's an existing road that's still got to provide some functionality and service up until a point that it can be upgraded. So, it will be a challenge.
But if we're saying that the obligations are enlivened either when the trigger threshold is met or when developers are using the road, then 2 points flow from that. One is by reason of what's happening there, to Councillor Collins' point, there's truckloads of stuff going down the road. So are they not using it on that basis? And the second point is, do we know whether construction traffic is using Twarts Road? And if that's the case, then those obligations are also enlivened, aren't they? But you just said that they would be.
Look, I think in terms of development obligations, it's mainly related to the allotment, so the development lot generation of traffic, not necessarily the construction traffic. There has been traffic counts done on Twarts Road. I think that was a requirement of the road safety audit that was undertaken earlier. So we do have some data on that. That can be programmed in regularly, and there's certainly some trigger points in the roads deed, particularly with that roundabout that we mentioned, that has a traffic count trigger point in it as well. So the security that, sorry, just to sort of make a point there, but in terms of council security and how can you actually enforce the deeds, it's through withholding land division clearances. So that's really its primary mechanism. So that, it basically prevents any further development beyond that trigger point, if that makes sense.
Councillor Simon?
Yeah, just wondering, there is a lot of construction traffic on that road, like massively, and obviously the entire Trinity College was built through the back entrance to the boulevard ends up on Twarts Road, and all the construction traffic went through there. So I've known this road for 25 years, so obviously it's been in its worst state ever since this construction traffic's been on there. I mean, there's other issues and stuff, but I mean, it's definitely the traffic is deteriorating road. I'm just wondering if there's some sort of rational argument saying that, like, these people are trashing the road or partially trashing the road, that maybe they could, I don't know, contribute to the maintenance. I mean, I see that we don't want to build a brand new road and then rip it up in 26 for the SMO. I mean, that's silly, but maybe that they can contribute to the maintenance cost somehow, maybe 20%, whatever.
That's an interesting point to make. I expect there could be some provisions within the Local Government Act to explore that. So I think that's probably worth taking on notice. Enforcing it, I guess what the council would need to prove is that there's greater traffic than what the classification of the road standard is, which, the council's got some guidelines around classifications in terms of how much traffic load would meet certain classifications. So, that's something to be explored. I think I'd be surprised if there's not some sort of challenge from any landowner or developer if the council is seeking to, seek damages for damage to road, based upon on their traffic.
Yeah, sorry, but just to a point, because maybe I've built plenty of roads around the country where absolutely councils will go after contractors, in my experience, to recover damage to their assets. So presumably there was a dilapidation report prepared on Twarts Road before this stuff started that would be a baseline that said this is the condition it was in. And then we do one that says this is the condition it's in now, and if it's deteriorated, then would the council have rights to recover those costs?
Yeah, I think obviously the council's undertaken a condition assessment of its own entire road network. Twarts Road would be part of that, so there's certainly data available to it, and I think that was reinforced in the briefing session that was held last Friday, was it? Thursday, with Unsealed Roads, from Rod Ellis from Tonkin. So yeah, there's certainly data out there that we could draw upon to sort of measure the performance of that road, over time. But I think the important message I was communicating earlier was it's more around the classification of the road. So if you've got a class 2 road, for example, that caters for a range of traffic up to where we would perceive a class 1 road to kick in, if Torts Road had experienced less traffic than that historically and performed okay, but it's still within a class 2 classification and not performing well, I guess it's still within the class 2 classification, and council's committed to maintaining that road for that particular classification, if that makes sense. So it could be a difficult avenue to pursue, but certainly something I think that's worth taking on notice to have a look at.
Councillor Collins?
One problem we probably had, we dug it up, didn't we? We stuck a trencher straight in the guts of it there for a few Ks.
Correct.
So, it's going to be pretty hard that, the detriment of the road, we've had some responsibility for that. But how many more things have to go down there? So we've got the bunyip pipe in, the sewage has got to go down there, stormwater has to go down there, is it? The gas?
Yeah, I guess stormwater, it's a major flow path for stormwater, so there will be some works required to achieve the critical flows. Yeah.
So the road might be fully completed to long way away.
Correct.
All the amenities are put in.
Yes. Yeah. So I guess what we do know is SA Water and their timing. So they're talking mid 2027. So I guess that would be the earliest opportunity.
That's for sewage
and potable water.
So you're going to do the whole lot. Let's do the whole lot and do both things at once.
I guess we don't have that level of detail at the moment. So we would assume that they're trying to do that complete bit of work, and that's certainly something we've been impressed upon them, the importance of Torts Road and getting that work done in essentially one hit.
Then where's that sewage going to go?
That basically goes via Williston and back to the Bolivar treatment plant. Yep. So just some other influences there before I throw back to the CEO. There are some state influences happening as well. Obviously, we've got the housing roadmap, which is driving those mainly water infrastructure upgrades, Greater Adelaide Regional Plan, with satellite city growth potentially on the table there. Now, obviously, that'll get released. We're hearing sort of February, March next year, so we'll know more on that, and the transport strategy as well. So, whilst that might not directly impact Torts Road, it certainly will with Kangaroo Flat, which is currently assigned as a freight route mode, east-west freight route mode, and obviously if the GARP growth occurs, that may or may not be on or off the table again. So there's some other influences there. CEO Richard.
Yeah, I think probably the key summary to that is there's nothing in the deed that targets the maintenance of the roads, because that's the key one. So, through this, it's really just an increased maintenance level rather than reclassifying the road, but effectively we're maintaining it to the highest standard for an unsealed road.
Anything further, councillors?
Oh, sorry, I haven't quite finished, Mr. Mayor. Couple of slides. Obviously there's an option here for council to consider an upgrade, prior to some of those developer obligations that are in the deed. So we asked the independent case manager for the Roseworthy Township expansion, who has a role in the infrastructure deeds, what can and can't be done. They have confirmed that funds that developers pay into the road infrastructure fund can be utilised for a road design. So council could access those funds to do a road design. And I think that's pretty important to have a look at all those services and where they're going to go, understand timing, and also be able to cost up what that road might cost to upgrade, so that when that trigger point hits, council, will understand, well, will it have enough funds in the road infrastructure fund to be able to do that work, or should it in fact try and chase a grant or something like that, so that council isn't making up the difference. So that's the third point there. But the other key point is that no monies from the fund can be used for construction work up until those deed triggers. So if council did choose to intervene and do an upgrade, it couldn't recover monies from the fund after those trigger points. So I guess what are the options? Council could choose to invest more in the unsealed road at the moment. That could be via a resheet in full or part. So that could be just key sections or components of the road. It could choose to lay a really light seal on there just to actually get it sealed to improve performance, noting that it's probably not going to be a long-lived asset. And it will be sacrificial to the future upgrade. So that's something that's obviously going to be more expensive. A couple of things that we would potentially test with the roads deed reference group. So in the road infrastructure deed, there is a reference group that exists, and they can be called upon to make comment on certain things. So if the council wish to proceed with a road design, a road upgrade design, we would certainly be seeking the reference group opinion on that, and whether they'd be okay for the road infrastructure funds to be used for that purpose. I guess the other thing is we could look to renegotiate these deeds, and we could test that with the roads deed reference group as well. In my view, I think there'd be a low probability of successfully negotiating variations based on past history. So that might not be a productive avenue, but something that we can certainly test with the reference group. And that last point about grant funding is really to shore up the council's position at that 1,700 lot trigger to see if it's the council that's got to go in and build that road. Does it have enough funds in the road infrastructure fund to do that? If not, would we chase some grants? So that essentially closes out the presentation. Happy to answer questions.
So this diagram is really good. Thanks, Kyron, in the presentation. So if there was an opportunity to sort of seal it just to improve it temporarily until these obligations in the deed are enlivened, if they're not already, then would there be grant funding available
for something like that, or not?
Through the chair, if we were to apply for grant funding to upgrade the road in whatever form, if we were successful for that, we would need to be mindful that we would not be able to go for that grant again if we needed it to do the proper upgrade. So whatever we do now, if we do anything, it is our cost sacrificial, because we need to be aware it's going to be dug up. It's just temporary.
Thank you, Megan. Any further councillor Collins?
Is there any way you can work out how much a spray seal cheap bitumen road would cost, and how much it would cost to maintain for 4 years, in comparison to having an unsealed road with the maintenance for the same period? There must be. Can you estimate the cost of each proposal and then see which is the most cost effective? Because if we're going to have people going down there maintaining it 4 times a year, or if you just do a spray seal, which cheap job which lasts 4 years, now it's stuffed and you rip it up. Is there any way you can estimate that or not?
Through the chair, that would be a good exercise to do, which we have done in part. April or May, we provided a report to council which had costs for options. With your spray seal, got to be mindful that with the traffic as well, and you just got your shoulders, there's going to be edge breaks, going to be potholes that we need to continually fill. With a sheeted road, we're just grading it, so it's a cheaper cost. But we can do the exercise if you like.
Thank you, Megan.
But the actual cost, though, is very different. If we were to do a spray seal, I think it was about $1 million. If it was to be fully resheeted, it was about 330, something like that. So that's a capital cost. That doesn't include the maintenance. So if that gives you an indication.
It's a good comment, and it is worth exploring, but it is an expensive option. I mean, as an example, if it did, even if it say cost you $400,000, you're going to depreciate that asset over 4 years, so it's going to cost you $100,000 a year in depreciation straight up. But yeah, it's at the end of the day, it'll come down to a level of service and what we're looking for over that period, because without a doubt, to look after that road in that period of time we're talking, we will have to be on top of it, and our community will either have to accept it or our broader community will have to fund it.
Another option you did have to us 6 months ago was you close it. So if you close it, I was about to ask a question.
It'd be cheaper to move the Roseworthy post office.
But there's no alternative. So obviously you must have had, if you're going to close it, you must have had an idea of what you were going to do as an alternative. Surely, like we can't just close it and then not have an alternative.
Through the chair, it wasn't necessarily closed to everybody. It was merely a closure point, probably near the railway line. So people from one end will go from one direction. People can still access from the other end. All it will do will reduce the impact of the through traffic. People that are bypassing Horrocks Highway, let's say.
It's a really good question though, because at some point, and we talked about those services that need to go into the road, to construct the road, to get all of those services in, coordinate everybody, it won't be a short process. It'll actually be quite a long process. So during that period, we will need to give consideration to what that traffic is going to do. And I think that will be, that's going to be challenging for those people who are accustomed to utilising the full length of, Torts Road right up to Gartrell Street.
Would I be, through the chair, would I be right in assuming that people, if that road was closed, that would direct people to that Gartrell Road, Horrocks Highway intersection? Yeah, because that's pretty congested as it is. So yeah.
Thanks, Councillor.
Just just further to that, if you were to close Torts Road, you've got all the farm machinery that's got to go up in there. I'm sure you're not going to send that down Horrocks Highway. So, yeah, it would be a bigger thing than just closing it, because, yeah, all the farmers around there won't be getting through with their farm machinery that's still working on the blocks that the developers own that they're still utilising.
Thanks, Councillor Alderson. Anything further, councillors? What about you, Kyron? Anything further? It's been a great presentation. I must thank you, and I'm sorry for interrupting you earlier. Councillors, we can move on. Next is 14.2, the school hall. A very interesting subject brought up by Councillor Michael Phillips-Ryder. Thanks, Councillor Michael. Would you like to comment on your question?
No, look, I think the information that has been provided sort of clarifies it sufficiently. I think, for council to it's not for me to speak for all the council to intervene with an individual development planning issue, and potentially, incur a cost that all ratepayers would incur. I think Craig's said, all the planning team have set out the options there, and it's now with, the developer or others to consider what further action they can and can't take.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Michael. I must thank you also, Craig, as that's a very, very good response, and it does sort of address all the issues that could possibly be attached to that. I don't think anyone would like to see that hall sort of demolished or anything else, but you've got to be, you've got to be real about these things, and the reality says that if it's part now of a development application, and if one of the conditions that are there, how do you just change that? And that's the issue. And it sounds like you don't at this stage. Any further questions, councillors, or
just
comments?
Very, Mr. Mayor, from my, it's a historical building, but it's in pretty bad state.
Oh,
The floor goes up and down like that, so it's really, if it was to be maintained as a heritage item, it would just be ridiculous. And it's full of white ants and all that sort of stuff. But it's just
Be very difficult to
very
move it also, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
If you wanted to move it lock, stock and barrel, it would be extremely difficult.
No, he hasn't done that. No. I used to play carpet bowls on there. You roll it down, you ball it in up the other side. So it's pretty good.
All right, well, thank you for that, councillors. Oh, Councillor Simon.
Just to understand this correctly, so that hall needs to be demolished, which I completely agree with, because he's done the deal, so now he needs to do it. I don't see any way out. It's just that time frame ran out a while ago. So how long are we going to wait till he actually going to do it? Is there any enforcement mechanism, or are you on his case, or are we just going to wait? But what's the deal?
So through the chair, thank you. That's a good question. So the timeframe, we've allowed for, I guess, contact with the applicant. The last advice was that he was seeking some advice and would be coming back to the team with more information before Christmas. But we are at the point where, we're looking for something of a pathway forward. If there's a revised proposal, what does that look like, and when's that going to be progressed? But beyond that, it'll be, unless the matter is addressed by removal of the building in line with the approval that's been given and the condition that's been applied, it unfortunately becomes an enforcement matter beyond that.
Thank you, Craig. Anything further, councillors? If not, we'll move on to 14.3, industrial land and vacant land rate rebate. Councillor Moffat, do you have any comments in relation to the question?
No, look, I think excuse me, I think the report fulfilled the brief. I guess the view that I've formed, and I think, perhaps from my perspective unintentionally, is that council might have overlooked some other ratepayers that might have fallen through the cracks of our rate rebate scheme that was designed to ameliorate some of the valuation increases. And so on that basis, I would like to see council address that issue. And I've provided a motion, I guess it's without notice, is it, or on notice? In any case, a motion to Corey and governance to that effect. Effectively, it would be on the same conditions as the primary production and residential ratepayers, but applying it to the industrial and vacant land uses.
So did I get that right, Councillor Michael, that you're going to move a motion in that respect?
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, so what I've put in there is that we write to all of the affected ratepayers, so they actually receive something in the mail that says, this is what it is, this is what you need to do, and by when. As you can see up there, by the 31st of January, because they'll need to apply, as I understand it, before the 28th of February.
Thanks, Councillor Michael. Well, there's a motion without notice. Would someone like to second that? Councillor Simon, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, I do see the point in this, and then I've talked to a few disgruntled ratepayers there. There's sort of this similar thing that probably Councillor Michael heard. And in the report from the administration, it says that there's $87,000 unused funds that could technically be spent on the high value rebates. And per the report, we only need 72,000. So it seems the numbers seem to stack up.
Thank you, Councillor Simon. Any further comments or questions, councillors? If not, would someone like to second that motion? I think Councillor Simon did. All clear? You can all read that clearly, councillors? All right, got a mover and a seconder. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Those against? And that's carried. Thank you, councillors, and thank you, Councillor Michael, for raising that. We move on to questions without notice. Have any questions without notice? If not, Councillor Allison.
Thank you, Mayor Bevan. It's just a question, just on Muddlawera Road. Do we have an update on the date on when that's going to start? The signs are up already and people are asking me, and I thought it was after harvest, but I don't know what date because there's not much of a harvest. So,
thank you. Through the chair, we've actually just prepared a number of letters to go to the residents. Probably next week they're going to go out for a street meeting, subject to making sure we can book the Bosley's Supper Hall. The meeting will be in January, with the works to be commenced in January, probably late January, early Feb. That's Muddlawera Road, and I think we're doing something similar for Bethel Road, similar timing.
just going on from that. So what happens with the OD3 road route then when the works are undertaken for that small stretch from Red Banks to College, because that's the OD3 part?
Yeah, so there will still be access through there. We notify NHVR, so it'll be on the portal, so the truck drivers should know that there's works happening.
Thanks, Councillor Allison. Happy with that? Well, we can move on now to motions on notice, which is section 16.1. And we have a motion there from Councillor Simon. Would you like to talk to your motion, Councillor Simon?
Yes, please. I mean, I think the discussion pretty much explains my intent, I hope. We at our midterm refresher training session, our CEO asked us if we think our council is sustainable, and if not, what can we do about it? And obviously, there's always two things that you can do. You can increase rates, or you can decrease spending, and I'm much more on the decrease spending sort of side of the ledger. And so therefore, I suspect that there might be some money that could be saved in the economic development department. So therefore, this question is just to find out, what we're doing, and if it works. And as I sort of talked about it earlier, economic development does what it's meant to do, and if that money is well spent, and hopefully this will tease that out, and we can make decisions following this report. So it might be that we find out that we're doing an absolute excellent job, and I don't think anybody would want to cut any money, but maybe we don't, and then there might be some fat that could be cut. That's the intent of the motion.
Thanks, Councillor Simon. Do we have a seconder for this motion? Councillor Peter, would you like to speak to it?
Excuse me.
Any further comments or questions, councillors?
The only comment I would make, Lynette has pointed out, I think, is generally a little bit tight. But we're going to have Christmas, and everyone wants to enjoy their break, and would February be more realistic, or I don't know? I'd just be that happy with February.
Thanks for that, Councillor Conlon, because in fairness, this is a fairly big instruction. There's a fair bit of work involved in this. It's not if you want it to be, accurate and meaningful. There's a lot of work, and I think an extra month might be very helpful. You happy to move that to February?
February. Put February, if it comes in January, it comes in January.
We're all comfortable with that, councillors? We understand what the motion's all about, and we've had our chance to have a discussion in relation to that, so I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. We'll see where that goes. Thank you, Councillor Simon. The next one again from Councillor Simon, and this one's in relation to a management accounting policy, etc. There is a discussion point there, but there's also been quite a in-depth response to this motion as well. Would you like to speak to your motion, Councillor Simon?
Yes, please. So, I mean, I really like the response. So to me, it seems like that most of what this management accounting policy might look like, and I'm not accounting in any stretch. And actually, the idea of a management accounting policy came from Nigel's comment that during that session we were talking about, and he was like, "Oh, we could do management accounting," and I didn't even know what that was. Looked it up. It's like, "Oh, management accounting. That's what we need." So I really like the response. So, but the thing that we probably still need to do is the bottom. So a decision will need to be made on defining the non-capital strategic projects that are not otherwise captured, so that we do a job costing system for all projects. That's literally all what this is all about. So yeah, that's basically what this is trying to achieve. All it's trying to achieve. I don't want to create any more work that's unnecessary. I don't want to do anything like the busy work, as Councillor Dean would point out. I'm absolutely against that myself. So this is just to find so the councils have better information ready to make decisions on a more evidence-based basis, and that's what this is trying to achieve. And I hope I put it open enough. It just says a management accounting policy. That I'm not saying how big that has to be or how extensive it has to be or whatever, but it just needs to give us, as the response says, just a job costing system that captures every job, every capital and strategic project. So that's basically what it's all about.
So you're quite satisfied with the response, but it sounds like you're not
very much
understanding what it is.
No, I'm very happy with the response, but it's still this management accounting policy would still have to include, and it says down here, an instruction that we do have to capture every project and have and not just right now we just have strategic projects and not even all of them captured. And I really want to make sure that we capture every single project that happens, so we as the members know what gets spent on what. Like drawers and counter 5 shillings or past stuff, future stuff, that we just know where the money goes, because I think I personally don't know, and I think some other people don't know either. So
thanks, Councillor Simon. Do we have someone to second this motion? All right. Councillor Collins, would you like to speak to it? Further questions or comments, councillors, in relation to this? Have any comment, Richard? No. Further comments, councillors? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Those against? Motion's carried. Thank you, councillors. And we can move on. We move on to the 16.3 with Tilly Highway, Councillor Michael. I have a motion there. Would you like to speak to your motion?
Yeah, look, briefly, Mayor Bill, I mean, there's been a number of accidents on the Tilly Highway this year and certainly before this year, and without speculating on the causes of those incidents, it's been pleasing to see that there's some safety upgrades planned north of Kapunda, which I think are underway at the moment. I think council, the community expects council to show leadership on this issue. The Tilly Highway isn't a road that the council has custody or control of, but it certainly has a responsibility to advocate on behalf of the community, and that's all I'm really asking the CEO
or the administration to do on this issue.
Thanks, councillor Michael. Do we have a seconder for this motion? Thanks, councillor Collins. Would you like to speak to it?
Yeah, I'd like to speak. I fully agree with this, but there's been a lot of talk for a long time that, people want overtaking lanes and other things on this road. So
I agree.
it'll be good to pressure DIT again, but it's been done a lot. We've really asked them, there's a community, it's been going for 10 years. So it'll be good to get it renewed and really drive it. And, now we've got examples, tragic as they are, that, it needs to be done. So, yeah, I'm strongly in support of it.
Yeah, thanks, councillor Simon. I think that this is an excellent motion because we all know that the Tilly Highway can't continue forever the way it is. It's going to kill people. But we've got to, if we're going to go to the department or anyone to seek assistance, we need to know what we're talking about and what we want. I think, the matter of passing lanes and so forth is a good start. We can plan for that. We can plan where we think they should be. They might disagree, but at least we're going there with something. And I think we'll be doing the right thing by our region in trying to get some upgrade to that particular road that's possible to do. I mean, we don't want to be going down there with something that just can't be done. Just physically impossible and or too expensive. But passing lanes, surely should be able to get away with that. Any further comments or questions?
Yeah, Matt, Bill, just a query. We're asking for the CEO. Should it be coming from the CEO or should it be coming from our council? Should the letter come from the mayor and the council rather than from the CEO? That's my
That's a good
query.
point.
I mean,
What do you think, councillor?
I just feel that would be a more guttural thing. And I'm sure you can get a letter drafted up for you, Bill.
Oh,
so.
yeah. Got the best ladies in the world up the end there. Oh.
So that would be my change to this motion, that it was from the mayor and the council rather than from the CEO.
Happy with that, councillor Michael?
Yeah,
Councillor
I think in reality, I was going to get Mayor Bill to sign it. Coming from mayor to minister is always a good approach. Agreed. But yeah,
Wouldn't mind having a bit of a go at
done.
it. It's thank you, councillors, and thank you, Bill. I think it was councillor Bill. It's a good addition. Oh, councillor Fabio.
Through the chair. I travel that road every day, as most of you do, including the staff here. Yeah, I know, it's great. My concern, I have one concern, is that that if we empower DIT to do it all themselves, yes, they are responsible if they don't achieve the desired outcome. But at the same time, I think there needs to be some sort of direction as to what they need to do in regards to improvements. I know, a couple of things that always spring to mind for me when I'm travelling to and from work is that, as I'm leaving Kapunda, heading down towards Freeling, there's a lot of traffic that pulls out of there. At the traffic that's already on Tilly Highway, doing 100 kilometres an hour, you're covering close to 500 500 metres or half a kilometre in the time that it takes the average car to accelerate out of Freeling. By that time you're hard on the anchors type thing. When I certainly went for my driving test or whatever, if you caused a vehicle to deviate, change direction, speed up, slow down type thing, it was sort of a fail type thing. So, I don't think there's a true understanding there. So I don't know whether it needs to be advertising the way of, sort of billboards or something like that, similar to the way they've got billboards that say about the seatbelt. I don't think the seatbelt's so much of an issue anymore. I think it's quite habitual now to put seatbelts on, but some education around the time and distance it takes to accelerate would be quite helpful. The other thing is, and I guess in retrospect to that, something that I believe that DIT was empowered to do, which was to place flashing lights at that other intersection. I think that's a complete balls up, to be honest. It's created a hassle because it's an advisory sign. Some people slow down, some people don't. So, sometimes you've got people jumping on the anchors because the car in front's slowed down at 70. Other times they haven't. Then you've got I guess the perception from the people pulling out of that intersection, pulling out of Freeling there, that, okay, is this car that's coming towards me, are they travelling at 100 and I'll better wait, or have they slowed down to 70 and I've got time to get up and go? And then the fact that you've got Nurse Road that now, since Nurse's Road has become sealed, there's a lot of people that are now slowing down to turn left to go down Nurse Road, but there's no turn-in lane, and you end up with almost a nose to tail or tail to tail sort of nose to tail type situation there. We've got traffic pulling straight out of Freeling and then immediately turning left onto Nurse Road. It just creates a bottleneck in the morning and peak hour traffic, and it's a dog's breath.
There's a lot of design work that needs to be done.
I think we've got a lot of knowledge within this chamber of not only councillors, but like I said, staff that travel that road frequently enough that I think it would be beneficial to have some sort of level of input into any future developments that they plan to do on that road. And I would certainly quite happily volunteer my services, to be an advisor on that, as I'm sure others would as well.
Well, the letter could contain 4 examples, and they're perfect examples. And that's what I was trying to get at earlier. If we go there with just an open book and not asking for anything in particular, just a safety upgrade, we might fail. But I think if we can be more specific, like you raised, we might get some action. Okay, we'll do that. Got a motion up on the board there, councillors, up on the screen. We have a mover and a seconder. Are there any further questions in relation to this? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against, that's carried. Well done. Councillors, now we move into section 18. It's a confidential section. I need someone to move that we move into competence under section 90 of the Local Government Act. Councillor Collin and Councillor Fabio.